Hey, welcome to Rethinking Youth Ministry. I'm Sarah, and today I'm joined by Tyreek.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Chef.
Hey, everybody.
And Candace.
Hey.
And we're talking about faking it until you make it, fighting imposter syndrome as a youth ministry leader. And I'm super excited to have you guys here. All of you have youth ministry experience. You're seasoned youth leaders, but I am willing to bet there's probably a few times when you felt like you were dealing with imposter syndrome. So before we kind of dive into that, I would love to talk a little bit about what that means, what imposter syndrome is, and maybe kind of some personal experiences you guys had with that. How would y'all define that phrase for people who maybe aren't sure of what that means?
You're looking at me.
I saw your eyes, so yeah.
I was just giving you permission to speak because I felt like the Lord had laid upon your heart.
Got it. Okay. I would call imposter syndrome. It's this like maybe intense isn't the word, but it's definitely like self-doubt. Like I don't belong. Do I measure up? People are gonna find out that I'm not what they think I am.
Right.
And having to deal with that.
Yeah.
So if you're called to lead a ministry, it's like, am I really who they think I am? I don't think I'm that person. And having to deal with that self-doubt.
That's good.
That's so good.
It is so good. I think that's what it is. You know, you feel like, I don't deserve to be here. Mm-hmm. Whether it's walking into a meeting or speaking in front of a crowd or.
Yeah. I think self-doubt's probably a good word to put behind that.
Yeah, and I think because also as you were talking, Tyreek, it brought me back to when I first started in youth ministry. And I know this is true for so many people who first start. I was 21 years old. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times within a church, what you'll find is when you are that young and you are entering, begin walking in your faith and taking it more seriously, a lot of times within the church, people automatically want to put you with the children and the youth because you're young, right? And as you are beginning this faith journey and beginning walking in your faith, you're trying to figure out, okay, what does my life look like now personally? Mm-hmm. How do I live life, still have fun, take my faith seriously? So you're trying to answer that question. And then you're also possibly placed in a leadership position within a church. So you're trying to navigate personally your own faith sometimes. Well, this is true for me, navigating your own faith and, what is acceptable, what might not be acceptable, what's sinful, what is not sinful, what do I feel God pulling me away from and feeling God pushing me towards, but then still leading authentically in who I am.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
I think that's a great way to talk about it because there are different reasons we feel like imposters. Right? Like there's, I don't have enough skill to do this. When you're in ministry is, I'm not sure I know enough about the Bible to do this. You might feel like my faith life isn't together enough to be talking about this. And so there's different levels of it. I know as a teacher, before I started in ministry, I felt imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I mean, and if, every night before the first day of school, I had the dream that the kids took over, And to be honest.
In youth ministry, they did.
Yeah. And to be honest, if you don't have that dream, I don't know that you're really going to be a good teacher because you don't respect, what can actually happen. I remember, from probably the most where I felt like the imposter the most because I was my middle school principal came to me and said, "Have you ever coached basketball?" Now I'm a swimmer and I don't do anything where I have to cross my body. Right? There's no coordination there. And so, I laughed at her, and then she came back the next day. I was like, "No, you're actually the basketball coach." And I remember being like, "Wow, this is not going to go well." And I went out and I bought basketball I didn't know the positions. I didn't know the whatever.
Oh, wow. You really...
I knew how the game of basketball worked. I had played elementary school basketball, but from a coaching perspective,
was that book Basketball for Dummies?
Yeah. It totally was. So I learned the positions, everything else. And then when I felt most like the imposter, I walked into the gym and 97 kids had come out for 12 spots. And it was my responsibility
to figure out what
to choose the best 12. And I was a complete imposter.
Except that was actually true.
Yeah, that was true. But I've felt like that many times since.
Right.
And especially once you get into ministry and you add those different levels. I will say we won the division.
Oh, well done.
Shout out. Okay.
Yeah, we did.
So
and
did
then
you
we went
coach
undefeated
again?
the next year.
Well,
I just went strong on defense because
That's middle school.
I'm from Pittsburgh.
That's
what we do.
Pittsburgh.
Defense wins games.
Defense wins
Offense sells
championships.
tickets. Isn't that what it says?
Yeah.
So I wonder, Chef, in you navigating through that, and you said that's when you first started teaching, right?
Yeah, it was a couple years in.
Yeah. So how comfortable were you in that moment saying, I have no idea what I'm doing?
You know, the good news was my boss knew I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
She was basically saying, you're the best we got. So do the best
what a vote of confidence
you can. And then I asked for a ton of help and a ton of feedback from people who did know. And it went okay, but it was, nerve-wracking for sure. And then you go to speaking for the first time or walking into a meeting for the first time when you feel like, what am I doing here?
Well, I think you bring up a good point that there is actual like legitimate feelings where you aren't prepared to be in a position. And I think it's okay to feel that tension of I'm not necessarily equipped to be in this leadership role yet. I know I have a lot of growing to do. And then the tension on the other side feeling like you totally are equipped, you totally are called, you should be here.
Mm-hmm.
And I still feel this way.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's kind of that tension that I think you probably need to wrestle with. Right?
Yeah, I think I felt imposter syndrome the most when I was in seminary, right? So I graduated from college, went to seminary, and you're in this place with all these people, and you deserve to be there. Like you applied, they looked at your criteria, you met it, you got in. But when you walk through those doors, it was like everyone's in here smarter than me, and so you mute yourself, right? For whatever reason, you can mute yourself because you may feel like your race isn't valued in this space, your gender isn't valued in this space, like where you come from in the country isn't valued in this space, and so. But then over time, I know for me in seminary, I was like, wait a minute. None of us know anything.
Right.
Oh, okay. Y'all, okay, cool. And then you learn to just be bold enough to just be yourself and say, let the chips fall where they may. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is my perspective, and my perspective is valuable. And so I think sometimes just maturity and going through stuff, I think lets you beat it in a sense. But then there's always another level of like, wait a minute, do I really deserve to be here? Do I belong here?
Yeah, that's good.
And I hear this I hear this from a couple of different angles, right? Being comfortable with your leadership and admitting, hey, I don't really know what it is that I'm doing here. Being comfortable with your peers, hey, I don't really know what I'm doing here. And then, but how comfortable are we really with sharing with our students?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't really know what I'm doing here.
Right. Yeah.
I don't have
good question.
Yeah.
How much should you be willing to share? But I think I want to come back to that. But Tyreek, what you were saying with kind of, am I the only one that feels like I don't belong here? I think that is kind of a common misconception that we feel isolated in the tape that's running through our head. But everyone has the tape going through their head that's telling them they're not adequate in some way or another. And I think it's really freeing when you realize, no, everyone's got that same tape.
I think the craziest thing I heard was so Toni Morrison, who people say is America's greatest writer ever, struggled with this, right? So she wrote let me get it right. She got a Nobel. She's like the Nobel laureate in literature, all this stuff. And she said, I always wondered when I started a new book if they were gonna find out that I'm not who they think I am.
Right.
And it's like, but you are.
Right.
Toni Morrison.
But for real.
Right.
Do you know who you are? Yeah, but don't you also think there's a degree of health in not believing your own press?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I feel like also I think the tension is there's the self-imposter, but then there's also like the celebrity culture. So it's like you don't want to doubt who you are and what you've been gifted to do, but also you don't want to be such a big deal that you're a jerk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think that's when you lose touch, especially in student culture.
Right.
Because what we feel in those moments is what our students feel every day as they're trying to figure out their identity and everything else. It's like, how far does it go for one of your seminary, buddies to turn to you and say that was a really good point or something like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you start to realize, or, they say you're so smart, you should be here. Those sorts of things, like those are the things our kids need as well. So it's a great way to be reminded. But I watch my sister the same way, Division I swimmer. She works with Olympic swimmers, and she helps swimmers get better, the best in the world, by talking to them about confidence. And it's like,
really?
Yeah, that's the thing that they all feel that way. The best in the world gets up and thinks, when are they going to find out I'm not who they think I am?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just it's part of the human condition, in a lot of ways.
And it does seem like maybe social media probably feeds into that a little bit. We do really put out.
We look at everybody's highlight reels.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I think the question becomes too, like, when does it become paralyzing?
Yes.
Like,
that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah. When does imposter syndrome or self-doubt become paralyzing to where you're not stepping into things that you should be stepping into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you guys seen that play out in your own experience where you can look back and see, I sold myself short in this situation. I could have done it and I didn't.
I think a lot of females do that, especially within ministry, in the context of ministry, where a lot of churches, females aren't necessarily permitted to speak. You know, they aren't permitted to pastor, right? Mm-hmm. When I first started walking in my calling, went to seminary, I was well into seminary before I even called my grandfather, who was a pastor, and told him that I was in seminary.
Oh, wow.
And when I did, he said there are many places for women in the church, and preaching and pastoring is not one, right? Mm-hmm. He's since called me back, and and we've talked about it, and he's blessed my ministry, and he's rooting me on and cheering me on. But in that moment, what that did for me, right? When I'm already hesitant walking in my faith, and then I'm have this person who I tremendously respect saying this to me. So it's interesting how males versus females navigate that water and stepping into there.
Yeah.
I was talking to a mentee of mine earlier today, and she was applying for a job. And I said, when you walk in, don't necessarily walk in cocky, I said, but when males and females walk into a room, a lot of times males walk in, they sit right down in the seat, and they put their feet up on the table like they belong, but females will say, hey, is this the right room? Mm-hmm. And when you walk into this space, just have the confidence in knowing, even if you don't think that you're supposed to be there, shoot, I doubt myself sitting at the table right here, but it's about just doing it anyhow, what a do it afraid kind of thing.
Well, it's interesting when we were, preparing for this podcast, I found that it wasn't just in ministry, but women tend to suffer from imposter syndrome more than men. And I would think that would be even more true in ministry context. So I just wonder why that plays out that way.
We live in a misogynist society.
Next.
Thank you, Tyreek. I didn't want to say it, so I appreciate it.
But I think being a teacher, like even the way that we socialize boys and girls differently, right?
Yeah.
I think that it can all lead to those things. I know for me as a teacher, like I always would try to encourage my girls to do stuff that boys would do, right? Mm-hmm. And this is first graders. So it's like, I remember we were on the playground and all the boys were playing basketball, and the little girl was like, I wish girls could play basketball. And I was like, why can't they? Like, there's so many girls that play basketball. Like, go play basketball.
Yeah.
And I think when we put barriers, because it's like society creates them, and sometimes we can reinforce them and not realize it. And I think that's something that we have to work. I think those can help create this imposter syndrome or this lack of confidence that when you show up, you don't belong there. And you almost have to have the audacity to say, you know what? I do belong here. Yeah. And I think it's the difference between having confidence and BSing. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Like, confidence says, I've prepared, I've studied, I've done the best I can. What's going to happen is going to happen. BS is, I don't care enough to learn, and I can figure it out on the fly, or I can just make something up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction.
Yes, and that's problematic. Like, we don't need, there's a lot of BSers in the church. We don't need more of them.
Right. Yeah.
We don't need someone pretending to be a lifeguard who hasn't been trained.
Can't swim.
We don't need people teaching scripture who haven't been trained.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you've got to be super cautious about just some things. It's one thing to get up and do a comedy act. It's another thing to get up and, have authority and talk about something that really matters.
Right. Yeah. And I think that goes back to that tension that maybe we should feel to a degree, that this is a weighty kind of role that you step into in ministry and teaching, maybe especially.
And maybe what we should experience is more reverence and humility and respect, as opposed to I don't belong. And I think there might be a fine line between that, knowing when one stops and then when one begins, because it is a weighty responsibility. It is a humbling responsibility. It's something that we ought to walk around and carry with the utmost respect. And if we're not, then we're doing everyone a disservice. But finding the line between the two and where one ends and where the other begins is a bit challenging, maybe.
And I think you said something that's interesting. It is this thing of, in the church, how do you manage authority that's been put on you, right?
Yeah.
So like you said, it is the basketball coach. You walk into the gym, you're the coach.
Yeah.
Like everyone's looking to you to organize, to execute, to cast vision.
Right.
And what does it look like to say, okay, now you're the youth pastor.
Right.
This is like, you have authority to do what you need to do here. Yeah. And how do you manage that?
Yeah.
And if you fail, people go to hell.
Exactly.
On top of that.
Right.
In a handbasket.
No pressure. No pressure at all.
I mean, it is lifeguarding in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? I've always wanted my son, who's a swimmer, to be a lifeguard because I remember being 16 and sitting at that pool. And even though there's like 8 people there, it's like at the end of the day, like if something goes down, it's on me. And to feel that level of responsibility, I just think, if you don't have reverence for it, you're messed up. Or you don't realize, how important the situation is. So
Okay, so as we're talking about this imposter syndrome and this idea of feeling like we don't really measure up versus this very public persona that we kind of see in celebrity culture, do you think it's possible that this dissonance between the two, between the public persona and what's happening behind the scenes, has contributed to this sort of fall from grace that we've seen with a lot of celebrity pastors?
I think that's it's an interesting question because on one hand, I want to say, if you're doing what God has called you to do or asked you to do, it's going to be more than you feel like
you're capable of.
Right. So there's that side of it. On the other hand, if public has put you on a pedestal, if you have been seen as this person and you've got a secret and it just kind of keeps building, I would guess you're becoming more and more of an imposter talking about some things and that's just going to spiral to what we've seen, I would guess. It's so important to stay healthy as a leader, and this is one of the reasons.
So how would you combat that? Because I think you're right that there is a healthy sense of like,
don't get popular.
Don't
become a celebrity. I mean, the higher you get, the harder it is to share some of the stuff that's going on.
But sharing seems like that's really like
very much great community, safe people.
I think what would help is if we would all be just real and honest about who we are and what we're going through. And I think if more pastors, more people in leadership were just honest about the struggles that they face and they experience, then I think the challenge comes in when people feel like they need to hide so much and then they have these breakdowns, right? Now, if we allow... Lauryn Hill has something on her Unplugged CD, and if she says something like, if we could all just be honest about who we are and just be exposed, you're like, oh, you got one too? Kind of a thing, Because everybody has something. All of us here have something that we struggle with. But when we stand up on Sunday morning or whenever, and we prepare messages and we speak and we say, thus saith the Lord, there's a weight that's placed on us when we have to do that, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times the weight that's placed on us is feeling the need to feel like we are perfect and like we have everything together. And what it does is it makes people think that people who are in church leadership are,
have it all
flawless and have it all together. But if we were more transparent about our struggles, I'm not saying bleed on the congregation, but if we were more transparent about our struggles and sharing what it is that we're experiencing, what we're going through, then I think that it might provide for a safer space for other people.
Oh, it would.
I'm not going to close it, but y'all know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you're right. But I do think at some point you've moved past this general feeling that I'm in over my head that I think might be imposter syndrome to where you're really dealing with, like, I am putting on a charade. Like, this is not really me. And that's when you're going to start to run into, big issues. But from the beginning, from the first time you feel it, I think to say, wow, I really feel like I'm in over my head on this one, but clearly God's put me in this place.
Right.
And so I'm going to, with confidence, not necessarily in myself, but in what God has entrusted me with, give it a shot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the more we do that, the more we fake, the more it's going to become that tension that's just, it's just going to become a cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
And the more you fake, the more your chances of hurting the congregation or the people that you're called to serve anyway, because you're not, because if you fake, you're not asking anybody else's input who may actually be qualified to speak into the situation.
Right.
And so I think what we've been saying is it's okay. Like, everyone feels at times they don't belong. Right. And that's okay. Yeah. The problem is when you pretend so much that you create this wall around you that you don't seek feedback and influence from other people. And find it that it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not sure what's going on right now.
And no one knows really what's going on. That's when you start to get into trouble.
Yeah. So I think that kind of transitions into what do we do to combat the imposter syndrome? So it feels like really one of the bigger things is being willing to talk about it, when it shows up with people that are safe. Because Candace, you're making the point, like letting your congregation know you're not perfect. And I think that's true. But it also seems like you want to have a safe circle of people that are capable of speaking truth and do really know you and can kind of lean into that. What else would you guys recommend?
More leaders in therapy. I'm going to advertise that on every podcast that we have.
Go to counseling.
Because I believe in that. I mean, the therapist that I've been seeing her since I was 22 years old.
Right.
I'm 35, right? She knows my life. She's been around since before I got married and had kids. She knows me, man. You know?
Yeah.
And I think that it's so important to just be in therapy.
Yeah.
And just talking through some of that. You know?
We've talked a little bit about this, I think, on our mental health episode, but I think it's good and I think that's actually where some of this was birthed from, was that podcast, because I think that's important, that you want to have these safe places, especially for ministry leaders who don't feel like there is a safe pastoral voice for them in their church, because it's a job. Yeah. So having these people that can speak into them.
Which is, the higher you get, the harder it is to find safe places. So for those of you who are thinking, I hope someday, that's a great place to start. Like, find some community where you can, share your last 10%, find some safe people and start there. I think it's really an important part of it. The other part for me where I've kind of I've never gotten past it. Yeah. And in fact, I don't even know that it's healthy to get past it. Yeah. Like, the day I strap a microphone on to stand in front of a group of people and speak and I'm 100%
totally
confident, I'm probably arrogant and lost.
Yep. I think that's a really good point. Yeah.
But for me, it comes in the prep time. That's how I get there. Like, and my old boss, Andy, used to say, it depends on what you're nervous about. Like, if you're just nervous to speak, then you haven't prepped enough. But in his point to me, and he said, here's how you know when you're ready. When you find that thing you can't wait to tell this group of people, for this moment you've been entrusted with, to stand in front of a group of people, and you have found this biblical truth that you can't wait to tell them, then you're in the right place. Yeah. And you're still nervous to do well, to speak well, to speak clearly. But at the end of the day, like, that's the moment where I feel like, okay, I'm confident God has trusted me with this moment and this truth. Right. And I'm going to just trust him to fill the gap between what I feel like I'm capable to do. Yeah. And, and just do the best I can. And I've done really well sometimes. And I have also walked off and thought, what was that? Yeah. You know what I mean?
It keeps you humble.
Right. But nobody remembers the sermon by Monday. So you're in good shape.
Yeah. Either way, good or bad, you're out of the mind.
And I think when we see people, like you said, Andy Stanley, like Chef, you've been speaking for a long time, and other people who have just been really, speaking on these big stages for a really long time. Right. And we first start out and we are working to find our voice, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't really have our style and our rhythm and our groove yet, and we want to, imitate them, so we ended up becoming these carbon copies of somebody else who we're not, but it's not necessarily authentically true to who we are. Right. My sister and I, have this thing. When I first started, in ministry, she was like, hey, borrow it until you get your own. Yep. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you see, and if you see somebody else who does something speaking wise and you like it, borrow it. But as long as you're not like 20 years down the road and you're still trying to imitate this person, but you're borrowing it until you find your own language and you find your own voice, right? Mm-hmm. Prime example, when I first started preaching, my mentor, she, to this day, still takes her shoes off before she stands up and preaches, right? When I preached my first sermon, in the video, you can see me unbuckling my shoes, trying to get my shoes off, right? Right. And, for a while I did that, you know, until I realized I don't need to do this because this is not mine. Yeah. Right. Yep. But I did it for a while because I'm like, hey, she's someone who I admire. Let me try it on for size. Yeah. It didn't fit me. And I got my own groove and I'm way more comfortable in my own skin. But as long as we're not, 10 years down the road, and I don't know when that fine line ends, you know, but
that's good.
But with this generation, like you have to find your own voice or they're not going to listen. Yeah, it's such an integrity culture that, I remember like kind of coaching up some of the younger speakers in the ministry. And one in particular, he was such a student of speakers. Like he would study the different speakers. He would practice just the way they stood, the way they kept their hands, the way they would make these transitions, some of the words they would say, and technically incredible. But from an integrity perspective, it was just missing. And so what I did to him, this sounds crazy to do because I'm so big on prep when it comes to communication. I said, you know what? Technically, you're a great speaker, but if you're going to find your voice, I need you to put 20 minutes of prep into this talk and close your book and just get up on stage and do it, and do it. And just so we could see if we could find, like, in there somewhere is your voice.
Yeah.
But you have studied so many speakers
Yeah.
that I'm having trouble finding it, and you're missing the group because it's not you.
Yeah.
You know? So
That's
again,
good.
he was an amazing technical speaker, but
At what point?
and I'm not saying it was a good idea.
But at what point did you feel the need to say, "Hey, let's cut this out"?
Yeah.
You've been faking other people too long.
Well, I don't think he was faking, and he wasn't trying to find his own voice. He was trying to be like them, as opposed to, and that's really where I think he was missing the emotional connection with.
So maybe he was putting
the
in the wrong
church.
kind of work, putting in the work in imitation instead of putting in the work in self-discovery.
I would not
Or constant
discourage
development.
anybody from watching somebody and some of the best.
Yeah.
That's just smart.
Right.
But at some point, you do have to you have to be yourself, and that's he had just kind of gone beyond that, where it was like, this isn't about
Right.
faking it till you find yours anymore. This is about you're trying to be someone you're not.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You are
That's a
faking
good
it.
distinction.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You are an imposter.
Yeah. No,
in
right.
some ways.
So I
Right.
guess maybe the question also becomes, how do we discover our? Maybe that's a different podcast. I don't know, but how do you really? And some of it, especially when it comes to speaking, some of it comes with, like you were saying, reps, just doing it over and over again,
Right.
and you realize you're standing up and you didn't even think about taking off your shoes.
Right.
But how do you find who you are authentically in all of this?
Yeah.
So maybe another way of asking that then is, how do we know when we're faking it? Like, what are the indications to look for to know that we're not being our authentic selves in that case?
I think if maybe, and maybe I'm wrong, but maybe if it doesn't come natural, you think? Maybe?
I think that's part of it.
Yeah, I think when other people can tell.
Yeah.
I think when other people can tell you, like, so I watch a lot of comedians.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm so interested. Like, how do they do what they
Yes.
do, right?
And they work so
Because
hard.
it's a lot like
It's
preaching.
like, it is a
Exactly.
whole lot. I've said that
Exactly.
too.
Yeah. Now I do think preaching is harder because you got to come up with new material every week.
That's true.
But it's still like,
Yes.
hats off
Unless
to
you're one of
y'all.
those traveling
You know
preachers.
what I mean?
Yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
that's true. Shout out. You get 3 or 4 talks, you good. I want that life. No, I don't.
different people.
Right. But I think it's like when you get off stage, someone be like, man, you watch a lot of Kevin Hart, or man, you watch a lot of whatever. And it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I do. And I'm just trying to see, I'm trying it on till
See
it
what
works.
lands.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I also think it could backfire in like meetings, right? Where you feel like you have to be, like you've seen certain type of leadership, right? And so you see the leader that knows all the answers, is very demanding and whatever. So you walk in and you're the same way, but you don't understand how it offends or mutes everybody else. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I think that's another a way of like, you're mimicking what you're seeing, but because you haven't analyzed to see how it impacts other people,
Right.
it doesn't,
Right.
it comes off problematic.
Or you might not have the clout that they have, so they've earned that kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I wonder too, if this could be wrong, but I wonder if some of it comes with age too, just experience,
Yep.
just that you get to a certain place in life where you kind of do figure out more of what you are. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think when you get to a place where you've done enough reps, you've prepared enough, and you can walk off, and again, we're just talking about speaking, not necessarily being in meetings, and you don't remember choosing your words carefully. You don't, you look back on it and go, all I know is that felt right. But I don't, if I'm thinking about every turn in there, I'm not in my natural state, if that makes sense. But if you can prepare to a place where you're just speaking and you're hitting your points, that you're aware of it to that point, but you look back at it and it was kind of automatic, like I drove home and don't remember making the turns, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Then you're yourself,
Right.
and that is a long way off for most of us, especially standing in front of a crowd. And I don't know that it's, I don't know that the question is, are we faking it? The question is, are we, preparing and earnestly trying to get better is part of it, because you haven't failed if you're trying some things you weren't quite authentically yourself. You took your responsibility seriously and you did a great job. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, so let's imagine that there's a 20-year-old who's listening to this. He's just started in youth ministry, or she's just started in youth ministry. And then there's a 45-year-old who's been doing this for 25 years. And they're both still feeling that tension, that they're an imposter. So the 20-year-old's like, I don't know what I'm doing. The 45-year-old still feels that, even though they've been doing it for 25 years. What would we say to them to kind of combat that imposter syndrome, faking it feeling?
I think it's twofold, right? I think there is a spiritual side of it where you have confidence in God and who God has made you to be, right? And God put you in this position of authority for a reason. Yeah. And regardless of how your feelings, regardless of how you feel, the truth is God has put you here for a reason. Yeah. And you need to believe that. So I think that's the spiritual side. I think the practical side is you need to work like you're trying to figure it out. Right. Like, don't just put it on like, oh, okay, well, God, the heavens will open and we'll just, no. Right. You should be studying. You should be asking questions. You should be trying to gather all the resources you can that will come better. Yeah. And then the things that you can control. And the things you can't, like, yo, God, this is where I need you at.
Don't use the Holy Spirit as an excuse.
That is so good.
The Holy Spirit is upset about that.
Yeah. He can be there when you're preparing,
don't you put that on me. Right.
That's the Holy Spirit says. You just didn't do your work.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. What else would you guys say?
I mean, for me, the spiritual side is you should always feel
the tension,
the weight, and it's okay. Yeah, you may become more comfortable in it, and I think part of it is exactly what you're saying. But a lot of times, I'm 47, and I go and talk to a group of students. I feel an imposter, right? But I feel like the minute I start to change who I am to try to connect with them, I am an imposter.
That's good.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And especially this generation, they just want integrity. They're okay with a 47-year-old. Yeah. Just be who you are. The minute you pretend to be something else, you've lost them.
Yeah. I think it kind of comes into the, if you're trying to, and this is all just kind of like the tangible pieces of it, changing the language. You should change your language to some degree so people understand what you're saying. But I don't mean necessarily throwing in slang if you don't naturally talk like that, or saying, "Oh, these are my youth ministry clothes."
Wait a minute.
Right. I didn't even hear that.
I don't even know what that means. I'm just saying things. Oh man, that's even old. So
yeah. But if you have like, hey, these are my youth ministry clothes, or
jean jacket.
that you're wearing, trying to be cool, it's not you, and at that authenticity, like Chef was saying, people was just,
pick up.
They pick up on that, and students love authenticity. But I think for the younger one, also for the one who's 22, I would have hated when people said this to me when I was 22. I'm like, yeah, but you don't know me, But now that I'm a bit older, I get it. At 22, you probably don't. You're still trying to navigate life. You're probably still trying to, just graduating high school if you went that route, or in college if you went that route, or you're still trying to understand who you are in this bigger world.
Your brain's not even done yet. It's still 3 years of cooking.
Right. So just keep on living and keep on trying.
Yeah, that's good. Well, guys, thank you so much for this. I think this is a great place to wrap up the conversation. Tyreek, Chef, and Candace, thanks for joining us and talking about faking it until you make it, fighting imposter syndrome as youth ministry leader. So before we go, we want to ask you a question. What is something ridiculous or not so ridiculous that you tried on stage that totally gave you away as an imposter? And to answer this question, head to our Facebook group. And the best way to get there is the link on our show notes page, rethinkingym.org. Until next time, thanks for joining us.